Kia ora, and thank you again for waiata. Thanks. Thank you. Right, we will move to item 15. And, sorry, where's my book? Going back and forth. Today we've got Christopher coming up for item 15. Kia ora, Christopher.
Kia ora. So, shall I start? Cool. So, I think over the recent years you've probably been presented with quite a few reports on private plan changes. This is another one, but it is a little bit different because it's a very small area involved. So I've got a short presentation. The plan change is called Crestview Rise. It's in Papakura. It's up on the hills above Papakura and adjoins the existing residential areas there. Perhaps if we move on for the next slide. Oh, do I do it? Is that the up button? That one? Right. Cool. So on that map there, you can see the suburban residential areas which go up to the top of the hills behind Papakura, and the red line indicates the plan change area. That's currently countryside living zone. The square above it is actually a water care reservoir designation. So that total site is just over 5 hectares, but the part of it that's going to be rezoned is actually a subsection of that. This is the proposed zoning map. You can see the existing suburban area, top of the map, and the tan area proposed mixed housing urban zone just below that. It's just about 2 hectares proposed mixed housing urban zone, which is estimated to provide between 60 to 90 dwellings of housing. The remainder of the site will remain as countryside living, and the plan change includes a precinct which, among other matters, creates requirements for the majority of the remainder of the site to be planted with native vegetation and protected, and there'll be a landscape buffer on that long line heading up the side of the site. And this is to create a firmer boundary between the urban area and the remaining countryside living. So our specialists have reviewed it, and there's no significant issues with it. We've had a close look at the infrastructure, so that's in conjunction with Water Care and Healthy Waters and Auckland Transport and Veolia. It can all be serviced by connection to the existing infrastructure. From the Healthy Waters side of it, there's now a draft stormwater management plan, which, if this proceeds, will ultimately go through an approval process, but we've been advised there's no significant risks with that. Also no significant issues with transport. Water Care advised that they have the capacity to service this. There's no capacity issues. From a planning perspective, revised rural urban boundary, which is that black line shown there, follows a better position than the current boundary in the sense that it encloses the land that's not too steep, whereas if you go further below that line, it's actually a ridge line followed by a steep fall. So it makes a better boundary, and from an environmental risk point of view, there's no issues. It passes all the requirements in clause 25 for acceptance for notification, although it is an out of sequence development. As I say, there's no infrastructure issues of concern, and the sort of broader high level policies are not really seriously affected by a 2 hectares worth of development, and those can be considered further during the actual notification and hearing process. So my recommendation is that this private plan change be accepted for public notification.
Thank you very much. Councillor Newman, do you have a question?
I do. Good afternoon. I'm very familiar with this area. I grew up at Duckworth Road, just under this particular location. So, whilst I accept that, I don't think there's a legal argument to not support this. I do want to just ask you about potentially some of the issues that may not be fully understood, but I do think are germane. On the other side of Settlement Road there, that the area is designed whereby to ensure that mitigation of unstable land slippage. The Papakura Children's Forest was planted in order to try and stabilise that site, because you will appreciate there's a significant gradient in that area, and there has been some lateral movement previously, and that's why that site is planted. The site that you're talking about here has been significantly held together for many, many years by an abundance of gorse, which has held the site together. Now that site's all just going to get cleared away, and we're just going to pour the concrete in and basically, and build houses all over it. So it is a bit challenging. So has that come into your thinking previously? The area hasn't been developed, not so much because it's not been commercially viable to do so, but because there have been some constraints on that particular area which have made it complex previously, but which now perhaps can be engineered.
Yes, that's a good question. So the applicant provided a geotechnical review, and that review was reviewed by our own geotechnical specialists who didn't have any specific concerns about the area in TAN, which is proposed to be rezoned as mixed housing urban. The area below the black line becomes progressively steeper, and if you look closely at the topographic contours, you can actually see signs of former slippage, but that area is going to stay as countryside living, and the requirements of the precinct are that that be planted and protected in perpetuity. So I think, and at the bottom of the site, near the intersection there is an existing Auckland Council stormwater easement, so that kind of protects that bottom corner. So there's limited room for geotechnical reasons to actually do more development on the lower portion of the site, but the upper area, which is marked in tan on that map, is considered stable enough to actually proceed through to development, and during the subdivision consenting process they'll look at that in more detail, and that would put controls on things like retaining walls and earthworks. But from the point of view of a plan change process, that area marked in tan is considered to be stable enough for urban use.
Okay, so we're going to have to rely on the controls that exist in relation to the network of retaining walls that are going to have to be built as this area is cut to ensure that we can hold back the earth. Can I just understand, you've reflected on Veolia's agreement that there are no constraints in the area. Of course, Veolia doesn't build the infrastructure. It requires a developer to build the infrastructure and invest. This is not part of the water care network. So the applicant is aware of the fact that the applicant is paying for the lot, because quite often in Papakura, that's not well understood, and the applicant puts these plan changes through and then says, deliver it. And whilst Watercare pushes back, Veolia absolutely will push back because they have not a cent to spend on the infrastructure required.
Yes, there has been quite a bit of communication between both Watercare but also Veolia in this particular case. Both Veolia and Watercare have a different role. Watercare looks after the overall network capacity, and Veolia is the manager of the pipeline network. Veolia has told the applicant that they need to upgrade some of the pipes downstream in the wastewater network, and the applicant has agreed to do that, and they have a costing for that. So that issue is theoretically resolvable to everybody's satisfaction. Watercare has more of an overview role, and while they don't particularly wish to support out-of-sequence development, there isn't a capacity constraint for this particular development. So I think the applicant in this case has been informed of the costs required to actually install the water and water supply infrastructure. May not always be the case.
Thank you. Councillor Walker.
Couple of questions. By protected, do I read or assume covenanted?
Sorry, I didn't quite catch that.
Okay, I'm just looking at the words up there. Remainder of site will remain countryside living and most of it will be planted and protected. Does protected mean covenanted?
Well, there's several mechanisms you can use for protection. One is by consent notice on titles in the subdivision, so it might be that mechanism or alternatively a covenant. So I don't know the exact detail, but that will be sorted out at the subdivision stage.
Okay, and if it's all being planted, particularly if there's a history of gorse on the site and the seed of that remains, latent for a long time, how's it going to be maintained? And who will pay for the maintenance?
Well, that's always a vexed issue with plantings, but it is designed, from understanding, to grow towards mature vegetation. And there is actually remnant native vegetation on the slope on the site now, mixed in with weed species, and the plan is to actually remove the weeds and replant that area. And in the long term, it'll become the obligation of the owner of that site. But
Thank you, Christopher. There's no more questions, so I'll just get you to step back and we will... did I have a mover? Or I'm happy to move it. Seconded by Deputy Mayor. Is there any debate on this one? Councillor Newman.
Chair, I accept that there is, you can't stop this, but I have, look, what I'm going to do is I'm going to abstain on this because I actually think the application is rubbish. I just do, and I know you can't stop this, but there's a reason why this has not been developed previously. It's just not a particularly sensible, suitable location for development such as this. And if I were to say yes to this, at some point somebody in the community is going to ask me, why did I do that? And yes, I could say, well, because I can't oppose it, but in all good conscience, I know what the residents in Crestview and Duckworth have been facing with already challenges with stormwater coming off this particular adjacent land. I know that it's death by a million cuts across, apparently, heaps of cuts across the Auckland region. This is just a fraction. I door knock this area. I know what the residents are saying to me. I don't disagree with their concerns about it, and it's not because I just have an in-principle concern about this particular part of Papakura. It hasn't been developed because it is not wise to develop it, and I expect that no doubt we'll have issues in the future, because we've already seen that incremental development taking place further along Duckworth Road, which is causing no end of problems for the residents under that hill. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. And I asked those exact questions to the staff before this meeting, and I have concerns as well, but due to the scale of 60 to 90 homes and due to the lack of legal reasons we have to reject, we do have to let this one go through to the hearing, but Megan has said that some of those issues we'll bring forward will be a part of our report to the hearing. So unfortunately or fortunately for whoever, this one is quite straightforward at this point. So all those in favour? Is any opposed?
opposed, and if I can have my vote recorded against.
Councillor Newman and Councillor Walker.
Sorry.
Councillor Newman and Councillor Walker. And Stewart. Thank you. Right, next to item